I'm Robin Feicht at Stamping Country. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to make this adorable floating pumpkins card. See the pumpkins stacked willy-nilly on the front? Well, guess what? You also have a trio of pumpkins on the flip side. So for this card, you're going to need the Harvest Hello stamp set. We're going to use the Apple Builder Punch, which also makes pumpkins. And we're going to use the Garden Lane designer paper. So and if you decide to color the pumpkins, you may want to use some Stampin' Blends. We're going to start with a 5.5-inch square piece of Mossy Meadow cardstock. And then we're going to score down one side at 4 1/4. That's going to make one side for our floating mechanism. So you want to fold that over and burnish that with your bone folder. Get a nice crisp fold. And then we're going to use our Garden Lane designer paper. So to cover this, we're going to cut a piece of designer paper that is 1 inch by 5 1/4 inches. And then we're going to cut another piece of cardstock that is 1 3/4 by 5 1/2. And then we're going to cut our designer paper that is 5 1/4 by 1 1/2. And then the inside piece is going to be 4 inches by 5 1/4. Okay, now we're going to stamp the pumpkins. You can do either pumpkins or apples, but for today's card we're going to use pumpkins. I'm using the Tuxedo Black ink and I'm going to stamp 3 pumpkins. I'm using the Pumpkin Pie Stampin' Blends. I'm first covering it with the light. I'm going outside the lines because I don't really want a white edge on these pumpkins. And then I'm shading it with the darker Pumpkin Pie. Just real quick and easy. Don't overthink this. Go with the lines. And then you can go back and blend with the lighter pumpkin. So I'll do the same thing on all 3. By doing the light and the dark, you're going to get the ridges on the pumpkin. And then we'll just punch that out with the Apple Builder Punch. I know, it should be Apple/Pumpkin Builder Punch. So we'll punch those out. Now, I want my edges to be just a little bit darker, so I'm taking the darker blend and just coloring those edges quick. Seems to blend in to the background if you do that. So that works fine. I'm stamping another trio of pumpkins on Pumpkin Pie cardstock, and we're going to cut that out. Now you could do 6 of one or 6 of another, or you could do like I'm doing, do the blended ones on the front and the cardstock ones on the inside. Now there's also stamps for the leaves, so I'll stamp 6 of those for my 6 pumpkins. I'm using Mossy Meadow ink on Mossy Meadow cardstock, and the Apple Builder Punch also it also punches the leaves and the stem. Now I'm only going to stamp 3 of the stems because on one side the stem's going to have to be flipped over and you really can't stamp on it. Well, you could, but it would be tricky. And it really looks fine if you don't stamp on it too. So I'm actually using the stamped stems on the inside because one of them is going to be layered on top of Mossy Meadow cardstock, and it shows up just a little bit better. Now I'm punching 3 extra stems just out of the paper without stamping. I'll show you more about that here in a minute. We're about ready to assemble. So you want to line up that second panel over on the edge. You could tape it down if you wanted to, which would probably be smart so it doesn't move. But hey, I'm willing to take the risk. Okay, so you want to put just a little bit, well, let's put these stems on. So on the pumpkins, you want the wider end on the bottom and the skinnier end on top, and then we'll do a leaf. If you were building apples, you would want the skinnier end on the bottom and get wider at the top. Just a Little FYI. So we'll go ahead and assemble these pumpkins. We're using the stems that aren't stamped on the front. This, you could easily just use the cardstock pumpkins all the way throughout. But I like the little variation. I think that the shaded pumpkins look good with the designer paper. All right, now to build our card. This is the fun part. You'll be amazed at how simple it is. So put just a little bit of glue down the two edges. And we're going to spread that across the two panels. You want to be careful not to put too much glue on or it's going to go through to the other side. And we don't necessarily want that. You could stack these on top of each other, but it's so much fun to put them a little bit willy-nilly. I'm popping the center one up just a little bit with my Stampin' Dimensions. And then we're going to do the same thing with the top one or the third one. We're just putting a little bit of glue and letting it span the two panels. Now the inside, we just can't leave that like that. So we're going to layer with our other three pumpkins on the other side. And it gives you a finished look on both sides of your card. And the pumpkins look like they're sort of floating. Seemed like a great time of year to do this floating pumpkin card. Probably in a few weeks we'll see Linus in the pumpkin patch waiting for the great pumpkin. So what a fun card to make in anticipation of that event. Plus it's just fun to go out into a pumpkin patch and pick out your pumpkin. So you want to be careful that you're lining up these pumpkins so that they don't show through on the other side. You want to line them up fairly evenly. We're using the stamped stems on this side. See where I layered the Mossy Meadow stem on the Mossy Meadow cardstock. It just shows up a little bit better. And then we'll add our leaves. And then we're going to double check the other side and make sure everything's lined up. Ooh, it's looking good. And then our last bit is our Garden Lane designer paper. You could also put a piece of light cardstock there. But I think that looks great. So it's very simple to make these floating pumpkin cards. You need your Harvest Hello stamp set, the Apple Builder Punch / Pumpkin Builder Punch, and some Garden Lane designer paper. Thanks so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Have a fabulous day.